The United States has made its first significant concession to China amid the escalating trade war between the two nations. In a low-profile announcement, the U.S. government revealed that certain electronic goods, including smartphones, computers and semiconductors imported from China, will of course be exempt from the so-called reciprocal tariffs that were introduced by President Donald Trump. And this exemption actually spares these products from tariffs that had been set at over 100%. And for more on this, on the impact of the tariff war on consumers and businesses, particularly here in South Africa, let's now welcome economist and PWC Strategy Senior Manager Xhanti Payi. Xhanti, welcome to SA Today. Thank you so much for your time. So talk us through exactly how does a global tariff war directly affect South African exports and trade balances?
Good afternoon and happy Sunday. Well, this is becoming a much more complicated issue, I think, that we thought of. Now, it's especially important to not talk about global tariffs. Because all the tariffs are usually levied between two countries, or at least between two trading entities, in the sense that, South Africa, for example, will trade with Botswana. And so, I will be Xhanti Payi, trading with Mr. Serame, who's in Botswana, and we'll be trading whatever we are trading. And then somebody, he would have ordered something from me that he has been delivered there. Now, the way that tariff works is that even though we might have agreed on a price of what that particular good is, when it arrives at the border of Botswana, the Botswanan government, if there is a tariff for that good, will then add on top of that the tariff, so that actually Mr. Serafe, who's that I work with, who I'm selling the product, has to now pay for that as they take them in. And what is important, therefore, is that if I had sold them the product at 100 Rand, and there's a tariff of 25%. When he arrives at the port to collect what he's bought from me, he must pay the 25 Rand himself, and then it makes the good 125 Rand, so that by the time it gets then to his shelves, it's 125 Rand. Now, it's important, perhaps, having said that, to understand why we have some of these tariffs. And there's been many, there are a number of reasons. But some of those that are easier, I guess, for us to understand in South Africa would include, for example, a tariff on wheat. Now, we have a tariff on wheat in the sense that when we import wheat, there's a particular amount of money that we put there. And that money is meant really to say we want to develop the local industry that clearly is being undermined perhaps by other trading partners. And then they take that tariff, that amount of money, and then what they invest in the sector, in farmers and all of those people, because they are saying that tariff is going to help us to actually develop the sector. There are other tariffs, for example, where they are trying to deal with unfairness or dumping. So many of viewers will know that there was a time where the South Americans, I think it was the Brazilians, were sending a lot of their chicken to South Africa, and they were sending, what they call in-bone chicken. So those would be thighs and wings and all of that, the parts of the chicken that we love, because for them, they really prefer breasts for their chicken. Now, if you think about that situation, they're literally flooding the South African market with things that they don't want, and therefore would have devastated the South African economy. So what the South African government can do in that sense is to actually put a tariff to try and stop that, or try and control that. So that's really how tariffs are supposed to work. And this is clearly not the situation there, because what we are dealing with now perhaps is not so much global tariffs, but the tariffs that America has implemented against its partners. And where the concern is for all of us is that then this becomes a war, a war on tariffs. And that's where basically a global tariff war would be, in the sense that everybody would be pushing back And that has really, really serious implications.
Let's continue with your great layman analogy there, Xhanti. I mean, for an even better understanding, which South African industries then are most exposed or susceptible to tariff hikes from major economies like the United States or China?
So it is clear those industries that obviously are very much dependent on exports. So we know, agricultural sector, for example, many people have talked about citrus. We also know about our motor manufacturing sector, for which South Africa actually invests quite a lot of money. And I think a lot of people know about some of the investments that goes into the motor manufacturing sector, where we actually export to the US. Then there's a number of minerals that we export to the US and so on and so forth. But I think what is also important is for us to understand that in an environment like this, where big powers such as China and the US are fighting, one of the things that we, there was a time when people used to say, when the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. We now know that China is also part of that kind of parallel, in the sense that the two of them fighting. You imagine, for example, that an Apple computer is designed in the UK, in the US, but then there's some parts of it that are collected in other areas of the world. Then it gets manufactured in China, and then it's redistributed, and it goes back, for example, to the US. So it was very clear that the price of an Apple computer will have to increase under these tariffs. But also what we have to know is that obviously the kind of sort of basing of these computers and all of that would have been, what price you have in the US. Many people, for example, used to travel to the US to buy an Apple computer there because it would have been cheaper. But it clearly, that price will also obviously affect others. Then there are other areas that are very, very important that can cause disruptions. Because remember, if you disrupt trade, you disrupt a whole system in which we work, and that can also affect us in terms of pathways to to the rail network and all of those kinds of things. So really, those are the many challenges that we face. And I mean, I could go on for longer, but that would be we would get to Monday morning.
Yes, and I mean, very smart of Trump there, also exempting certain of those everyday electronic products that are mostly consumed by the people of the United States there, Xhanti. But I mean, let's bring it back home. Could this tariff war then indirectly cause job losses or even price hikes here in South Africa? And how might then this tariff war directly affect South Africa's trade relationships within BRICS or even with the EU and the US?
Sure. And I think we can discuss this in two formulations. The first one is that, of course, South Africa has also been levied tariffs. I think because of that level, 10%, we're also now at that spot. But then in the second part, we have to think about it like this. Let's just focus on the trade between the US and China. Now, China has all these factories that manufacture all these wonderful things that they sell to the US and which they sell on a periodic basis. When China is able to do that because they've sort of built these infrastructures, these factories, they've developed, and a lot of people always say China is actually winning this war of trade and all of that because they've got cheap labor. No, China has done much more than that. They've invested in training, in expertise, they've invested in a lot of things that make and technologies that allow them to be right at the cutting edge and basically also be able to ride some of these industries. So you would think about how skilled the Chinese worker is and the scale at which they can produce these things. Now, the US disrupts that situation. They may very well disrupt the rest of us because, of course, whoever has invested in a particular factory to produce, say, a particular factory has been developed to produce certain things, 50% of which go to the US, but maybe some of it comes to South Africa and the rest of the African companies. Now, you must think about the factory owner. What does that factory owner do when they've lost 50% of their revenue? they are very likely to try and restructure that. They may increase prices, for other people that they produce for. They may close the factory that, has been part of also South Africa's produce. That's just but one example. Mm-hmm. But also it really disrupts the outlook in terms of investment. Because one of the things that tariffs are supposed to do, they're supposed to sort of indicate to business that, we are in the wrong industry or we're in the right industry. In this way, if, for example, South Africa started to indicate that they're going to levy tariffs on certain products, mm-hmm. and those products are going to be charged more when they arrive here at our gate, many South Africans will start to think, well, maybe actually, if that product is going to arrive here and then it's going to be charged 50% more, why don't I build that factory mm-hmm. so that I can actually take advantage of it? The sad thing about what we are seeing in the US is that unfortunately it gives us no opportunities such as that, because we know a tariff can be announced today, tomorrow removed, and then doubled by Monday. So that actually it does not give any person, any business person, any factory manager to think about what they really should be doing in this environment. And it is really the reason why many of us are worried, because we are struggling with expectations, with an outlook of where does this actually end.
Xhanti, very informative there. Thank you so much for your input this afternoon. Xhanti Payi is an economist as well as senior manager at PWC Strategy, weighing in on the global tariff war and its direct impact, particularly here on South Africa.